Thanks so much, Mark. I hope you're all well today. And if you're not, I hope that you can find some relief in practice, some spaciousness, some ease. I'm calling in from the land of the Council of the Three Fires, the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Ondawa people who were here long before I was ever here. And just want to acknowledge that I'm a sojourner here, as we all are on this earth. If you feel comfortable adding your gender pronouns to your name, that's a small gesture that can go a long way towards signaling to all members of this community that they are welcome here in the fullness of their humanity. I also want to thank in advance Jordan, who's working tech behind the scenes here, and also a good friend, Richard, who's going to be blowing shofar for us at the end of today's meditation session as a way to help us transition out of meditation and awaken to the possibility of taking our practice, quote unquote, off the cushion into our daily lives. So here we are on day 3 of this series, Teshuvah, Overcoming the Trance of Unworthiness. As a quick review, on Monday, we explored what the trance of unworthiness is and the ways in which our spiritual practice, in some ways, when undertaken while we're under the sway of the belief in our own smallness and our own unworthiness and our own deficiency, can actually exacerbate those kinds of feelings. And we can end up berating ourselves into despair. And we can, in that way, really distort the practice of teshuvah, right? Making it into a practice that makes us even smaller and that ultimately blocks our capacity to really grow and change and address what needs to be healed and repaired. When in fact, the practice itself, the practice of teshuvah itself, is a hopeful practice that's meant to help us open our hearts to the possibility of growth, of evolution, of repair, of connection. And yesterday we explored Rabbi Nachman's invitation to really try and see the good in ourselves, see the good in others, as a way to really open up the possibility for genuine teshuvah that is truly healing and restorative. Today, we're going to really come back to this practice of working on seeing the good in ourselves and go a little bit deeper into it. And I called today's session Grounding in Our Basic Goodness. So we're going to be exploring the ways in which, through Rabbi Nachman's invitation to practice, we might begin to point ourselves in the direction of our basic goodness. I want to turn again to Tara Brach. So Jordan, if you could pull up the text sheet for today and also share a link to that sheet in the chat box, that would be great for those who may wish to have it for later use or look at it now. Tara Brach here is reflecting on the question, what is good enough? Right? What is good enough? And as I read this, just consider, right? Have any of the scripts that she offers here, right? Have those ever been alive in your own mind, right? Have you ever noticed these kinds of stories or thought patterns percolating through your own mind? When I ask myself that question, the answer is absolutely, absolutely. I could have done better. I should have gotten more done. I wish I had been more sensitive. For many years, never enough was a chronic habit of my mind, and I could run endless variations on the theme. Finally, one night before going to bed, I sat down and asked myself, okay, what would be enough? What do I have to do to be good enough? Over the next weeks, I started tracking what happened after I'd completed a successful weekend of teaching, or after receiving feedback about contributing to others' well-being, or after being particularly kind or generous with someone. The enough feeling would last for about 2.4 minutes before I'd start fixating on what else I needed to do, how I needed to be more consistently sensitive and kind. Even the most satisfying accomplishments upon close inspection would seem tainted by ego and therefore not spiritual enough. Whatever I was doing, it didn't leave me with an enduring sense of enough. Since that long ago evening when I faced the never-ending narrative of falling short, I have discovered that enoughness has absolutely zero to do with accomplishing, nothing to do with achieving, and is not at all about trying to be good enough. Rather, the realization of enough is right here in the fullness of presence, in the tenderness of an open heart, in the silence that is listening to this life. These are the moments when the glow of gold, just to say our essential nature, our inherent goodness, shines through. You can take down the screen share, Jordan. And so Brock is inviting us to consider that happiness is an inside job. As long as we're clinging to external phenomena in order to feel that we are good enough, that we have what we need in this life to be happy, that we are worthy, we're always going to find ourselves being let down. Because even if we do a quote unquote good job, right, and we can pat ourselves on the shoulder for a short while, right, we soon experience a sense of desire for more external affirmation, more external accolades, right, more experiences and resources and affirmation from the outside to help trump up our sense of being good enough or worthy enough or acceptable enough. So Brock invites us instead to turn inward and cultivate a sense of our enoughness, of our good enoughness, of our innate worth and beauty and holiness and grandeur and fullness from the inside. We might say that's actually what spiritual practice is all about. And then we can ask, in light of her reminder that the realization of enough is right here in the tenderness of an open heart. What will actually open our hearts to the inherent fullness that's already there inside of us? We're going to be touching upon that question head on tomorrow. But for today, I want to turn again to Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, who offers us a concrete practice to help us restore the tenderness of our own open heart. Because when we're berating ourselves for our misdeeds, our mistakes, our errors, the ways in which we may not have been as sensitive, as kind, as loving, as truthful, as just, as honest as we would have liked to have been this past year, the heart closes. It becomes guarded and defensive, and it becomes convinced of its own separation from others. But when the heart can open, we can once again come into an awareness of our inherent connection with others and of our own inherent goodness. And from that place, we can then turn toward what needs attention from a place of open-heartedness, taking an assets-based approach rather than a deficits-based approach. And we can engage in the practice of teshuvah from a grounding in joy and a sense of our basic okayness, our basic enoughness, our basic goodness. So let's turn again to that screen share. If you can please pull that up again, Jordan, that would be so helpful. So Rabbi Nachman here is picking up from what he taught yesterday which is that we need to seek out the good points in other people, because even a person who appears to be very corrupt or evil has done some good in their life. And by focusing on the good in that person, we can actually create conditions that enable that person to overcome their own sense of unworthiness so they can actually do teshuvah. Rabbi Nachman says, likewise, we must go on searching until we find in ourselves yet another good thing. It's not enough, Rabbi Nachman says, just to find one good point in yourself. You have to keep collecting these good points, finding them, focusing your attention on them, becoming mindful of them, overcoming the tendency to focus and harp on the negativity and the harm that we've done. And although this good thing may be mixed with much impurity, impure intentions, right? Self-centered motivations, still we must extract some good point from there as well. Indeed, we must go on searching and gathering more good points. And it is through this practice that nigunim are made. You may not have seen this one coming, right? You might say, well and good, I'll cultivate this sense of my own goodness. I'll focus on these times in my life when I was altruistic and loving and generous, right? Rabbi Nachman says that practice itself enables us to really sing out wholeheartedly in prayer. As explained elsewhere, the aspect of playing a musical instrument, right, is the spiritual dimension of gathering the good spirit, the good ruach, the positive spirit from the ruach, from the spirit of gloom and depression. We can separate out those two things, right, and really kind of focus on the good and extract it from its being kind of overshadowed by our negativity bias. Through that practice, the notes of our heartfelt, prayerful song come into being. Therefore, I'm skipping to the next paragraph. By not letting ourselves fall, but reviving ourselves by searching and seeking until we find in ourselves some good points, gathering and separating those good points from what is harmful and extraneous within us. Through this, nigunim are made, as explained above. Then we are able to pray and sing and give praise to God. What he's essentially saying, is that the harmful things that we've done, they're not an outgrowth of who we truly are. They're extraneous to us. And the good that we've done is actually a reflection of our essential, basic nature, which is inherently good. And when we can connect with that place inside of ourselves, then prayer flows spontaneously, a sense of reconnection with the divine, which may have been severed, right, when we were focusing exclusively on the harm that we've done. Because remember, Tara Brach said that when we engage in that kind of thinking, right, we're often motivated by a sense of being a separate, isolated self. But when we can focus on our essential nature and the actions that have flowed from that inherent goodness inside of us, right, a sense of connection with the divine, with others, is restored, and then prayer wells up spontaneously from within us. Song wells up spontaneously from within us, right, in celebration of our inherent goodness and connection. Thanks, Jordan. You can take the screen share down. So I want to invite us now to turn to practice. And we're going to spend about 10 minutes doing this work Rabbi Nachman describes for us, which is still today so needed and necessary to help us break out of the trance of unworthiness. And I'm going to be speaking a little bit, but leaving some time for silence. So please don't be surprised and allow my voice to kind of fade into the backdrop with your experience taking center stage. Please settle into a posture that feels relaxed and simultaneously alert and dignified. I invite you to take 3 cleansing, deep breaths, gathering your attention in from wherever it may be, On the in-breath, gathering it into the body in this moment, and then on the out-breath, releasing any tension or tightness, any striving or holding. And the first thing I want to invite you to do after you've taken those 3 cleansing breaths is to bring to mind a time when you didn't show up as the person you hoped to be, the time when you missed the mark, perhaps a time when you spoke an untruth or acted insensitively, gossiped. Or maybe a time when you committed a sin of omission. And as you do that, just notice any stories the mind spins about who you are. Reflexively, habitually, the mind may begin to tell a story. You're a bad person. You're no good. You really blew it. You're never going to get it right. Is there some sort of a reflexive inner critic that shows up when you consider a harm that you've done? Is the voice in your head loving or critical, favorable or unfavorable? What's the lens with which you're looking upon yourself? Is it one-sided, myopic, and dark? Or is it panoramic, clear, and luminous? And then when you're ready, begin to shift gears and bring to mind wholesome, loving, kind, altruistic acts that you've done. A kind word, a hug given to someone in need, holding the door open, wishing someone well, or any other of a myriad of kind acts, kind words, kind thoughts. And as you do that, observe what arises in body, heart, and mind. As well as how this practice might shift your capacity to hold and view yourself with a more loving eye. Continue to gather in these good points, these points of light, these points of compassion and generosity. With each one, just notice how it impacts you in body, heart, and mind. And notice how it might change the lens with which you view yourself. If the inner critic shows up as you're contemplating acts of kindness and says something like, yeah, I know you did that kind thing, but you also did that rotten thing. Or, yeah, I know, but you're really thinking about yourself. You can say, okay, I see you. I see you. This is a habit, but I'm going to come back to focusing on the good. And now, once you really focused on and saturated your consciousness in the good that you've done, turn back to something harmful that you've done. And just notice, is the environment with which you hold an awareness of this harm, is it still as narrow, as self-critical? Does it have so much guilt and shame associated with it? Or is it more spacious, open, accepting, non-judgmental? Does the sense that you've done harm, does it completely co-opt your sense of who you are? Or are you able to remain aware that deep down you're essentially good, good enough, worthy enough, whole enough, kind enough, loving enough? Notice what you notice and feel what you feel. And before we turn to shofar blowing, I want to share with you a poem, continue meditating, and just notice how it lands with you. This is from Rabbi Sheila Weinberg, my teacher and a founding teacher of the Institute. It's called, Can I Forgive Myself? Can I forgive myself for striving, for preaching peace and mostly being at war with time, with my body, yes, even with dear friends whose standard I try to match? Can I forgive myself for not knowing how to rest, although we would all say the Sabbath is the holiest day? Can I forgive myself for trying to predict and arrange the future so I can be safe, even though I know there is only one true source of safety? Can I forgive myself for trying to take care of everything as if I could? Can I forgive myself for the rewards I have gained from striving, the praise, recognition, and admiration? Can I forgive myself, old, feminist, post-Holocaust, third generation, middle-class Jew, living at the end of the American Empire? Can I say, okay, you did great, and now it is time to turn slowly and sit down without an agenda, without a clue, just like that, getting close to life before it is over. There really is no one to forgive us, is there? Just stardust making its way home. Richard, take it away. Richard. We'll turn now to Mourner's Kaddish. If you're reciting Kaddish for a loved one or for someone else, please feel free to share their name in the chat. And we'll ask those who are not reciting Kaddish to respond lovingly by reciting Amen. Feel free to rise with me in body, in spirit, or in both. Vitkadal, Vitkadash,
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. May the memory of those departed be for blessing and inspire us acts of wisdom, kindness, compassion, and justice. For those who want to stay on for Q&A session, we'll be here until quarter after the hour. And for those who need to care friends, Shana Tova, may this be a year of good health, of peace, of kindness, of compassion, and of all good things for you and yours. If you are staying on and you'd like to ask a question, I want to invite you to please put your question in the chat, preceded by the word question in caps. And Mark, our good friend and our host for today, has had to jump on another IJS call, so I'll be both moderating and answering questions. Sheila's poem, by the way, comes from her book, just make sure I'm giving you the correct information here. God Loves the Stranger. The poem was from page 45 and it's called Can I Forgive Myself? I don't have the text right now in a format that I can easily copy and paste into the chat, but I do recommend buying her book. It's beautiful. Okay, let's see if we have any questions here. This is from Sandy. How do we know that the good side of us is indeed the deeper side of us, rather than both the good and bad being of equal depth? Such a wonderful question. Again, the question is, how do we know that the good side of us is the deeper or more authentic part of us, right? Over and against the harmful or self-centered side of our personality? Really, really good question here. I'm going to speak to this tomorrow in detail and offer us a practice that's designed to help us find our way back to our true nature. What I want to say from my own experience is that it took time to investigate this question and to look deeply inside of myself until I was able to discern which part of me is primary and which part of me is adjunct or accreted over or on top of, right, my essential nature. And so one way to do this, and there are actually hundreds and maybe thousands of ways to do this, depending on which spiritual tradition we're practicing in and what the particular orientation and worldview is. But one way that our tradition invites us to do this is to actually investigate every part of ourselves and ask ourselves, is it permanent or impermanent? Right? Because that which is impermanent can't be our true nature. True nature needs to be something that is always true, right? Is always there, is always present, is always operating kind of behind the scenes. So if we look at the world, let's say, right, which is certainly a part of our experience, it's very rare, unless we have some sort of mental illness, that we think, I am the world, right? We see the world is changing, the world is turning, we perceive it as being out there. When I'm looking at the cucumber plant right now outside my window, I don't think I am the cucumber plant. So then I begin to look internally at the parts of myself. And I look at the body. And on a meta level, you might say, on a kind of gross level, I see that the body is changing from year to year, right? It grows thinner, it grows more plump, it grows taller, it grows shorter, it grows more wrinkled, right? It experiences aches and pains that we haven't experienced before. Its range of motion changes, right? Its capacity for movement changes. Its range of ability changes, right? We once may have had 20/20 vision, and now suddenly, we don't. That's on a course level, and everybody in the world knows that that's true, right? And that eventually the physical body will die. But in practice, we have an opportunity to look at the body on a micro level, literally millisecond by millisecond. If we can really sharpen and hone our attention and our capacity to stay present moment by moment, we can observe how the body is changing every single millisecond or microsecond, right? There's nothing solid that you can say is really an object. The body is more of an energy field, right? Or an ocean of sensation, or an unfolding process. Right? And that's something you can see and experience directly if you're willing to work a little bit to actually hone your concentration and your mindfulness. So we say, okay, well, yes, I have a body, but I'm not the body. Well, what else is there? There are emotions and thoughts, what we might call mental phenomena. Also beliefs, mental images, volitions, intentions, right? We might call mental phenomena or mental formation. So we can also here observe with mindful awareness each of these phenomena. We can look at the whole mind structure, and we can see directly in the present moment, my thoughts are always changing, my beliefs are changing, my intentions are changing, my emotions are changing, right? And in fact, the very ego, which I take to be so solid, with this sense of I am this or that person, with that, these and those preferences, and history, and accolades, and accomplishments. We can look at all of this and see it's all changing moment by moment, moment by moment by moment. There's nothing fixed or solid. And even the self-centered ego, which acts out of malice at times, or self-protection, or self-cherishing, and doesn't always act as such in the most generous and loving and connected way, I can observe that phenomenon falling apart and coming back together, and falling apart and coming back together. And I can see all of the different parts that make it up, that comprise it. So then I say, well, what else is left? If I'm not the body, if I'm not inherently or essentially the body, and I'm not even my personality or my personhood, let alone my thoughts and my, mental projections and so on and so forth. What's left? There's only one thing left, friends. Awareness. Consciousness. So then we look at that and we put it to the same test as we put all other dimensions of our being. We explore not consciousness of something, like I'm aware of the screen. Obviously that changes because now I'm aware of the screen. But when I look over here to the left, I'm aware of a piano and a book and yoga blocks and so on and so forth. That obviously changes. But the consciousness itself, not that I'm aware of, but that I am aware, period. We can look at that and notice, oh, wait a minute. That doesn't seem to be changing. That seems to be steady, right? And then we can investigate its qualities. What's it like? And that's what we're going to do tomorrow. So I don't want to give it away. Right? But all of this is just to say that the parts of ourselves we usually label as good and bad, right? Those are usually just parts of our personality, and the whole personality structure is itself impermanent. It's relative, it's conditioned, right? But all of the world's spiritual traditions point us to a part of ourself that transcends the personality structure, which is our deep nature. And might it be possible that that deep nature is itself love, compassion, wisdom, expansiveness, freedom? It's a question I put to you as an object for your own contemplation, not one to be answered right here and now. That's my experience. As I said the other day, I'm not trying to convince you that I'm right. And I don't need you to have the same experience that I'm having. But I do think it's valuable to explore, who am I really beyond all of the impermanent parts of self that I take to be who I am when I'm not looking closely and investigating whether they actually have any true substantiality to them. We have another question here. This one's from Lori. In digging deep down to essential nature, I've always felt myself to be truly kind and have been told that I am as well. However, this practice made me wonder, is perhaps this kindness really just ego-based, people-pleasing nature, right? How do we heal this broken lens? I love this question because, it recognizes that we can be kind on a relative level, and that on a relative level, sometimes our kindness is tinged with self-centeredness, right? How many of us, by show of hands, have ever done an act of kindness thinking, if I do this, the other person will like me more, right? Put your hand up if you've ever done that. I'm not immune, right? We're all human beings here, right? So that's relative kindness or relative compassion. It may come from a really good impulse, but it's often mixed up with a sense of ego concern. What I'm suggesting is that true nature, when we recognize it and come to know its qualities, has none of that self-concern in it, right? We might call it pure or absolute love or absolute or pure compassion. And the more we can be in touch with true nature, the less self-centeredness there will be in our kind activity in the world, right? It will flow from, it will emerge from our essential nature. And we'll be able to give more unreservedly and with less self-concern. Again, an invitation to check out what's true in your own experience and not to take anything that I say as gospel. Right? I'm just a person like you who's trying to figure out how to live with greater wisdom, compassion, and ease. And I hope that in sharing today's teachings and the teachings during this series, we can all grow in that direction. And that I've added something of benefit to support you, both in entering into the work of this season in a way that can be life-affirming and heart-opening, and also help us to repair what's been breached, and simultaneously providing you with practices that you can use anywhere and any time in your life to help you live with greater balance and ease and connection. So we'll pause here today, and I'll hope to see you back here tomorrow at the same time to wrap up the series and sit into Rosh Hashanah. All the very best to you. Take good care.